Today we're going to make drawing hands easy. Well, easier. And we're going to use one of these. So first, the anatomy of the hand, which we're going to go through in like 30 seconds because we're not going to use it that much. It's just background information. So at the base of the palm, we're going to have some wrist bones, and then coming off those, branching out from there, are some carpals, right? And those turn into the fingers. And so by the time you get to the fingers, they've already started to branch out, which is why there's gaps between the fingers. And that is really useful to know. There's going to be three sort of muscles that we want to learn about. There's one that runs along here to the from the base of the palm to the wrist, and then one that runs along the little finger side of the palm. And then on the other side, there's one that sometimes bulges out between the thumb and the index finger. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about for anatomy is just the sort of fatty pads on the palm side of the hand. So you'll have like some fat here, some fat here, and that creates a sort of flatter, more concave bit in the middle of the palm. And also you'll notice like on the palm side of the fingers, for example, you might have some fatty pads, whereas on the top side of the hand, it's more skin and tendon and bone. There's less bulging out, there's less fatty pads, it's less soft there. So that's the anatomy done, finished. So let's move on to the big idea, the idea that's going to make the most difference to your hand drawings, and that's the palm box, right? So whatever it is in there, the bones, etc., it adds up to a boxy shape in the palm. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about no fingers, no thumb, no wrist, just the palm section of the hand. It looks like a boxy shape, but it's not a perfect box with parallel sides and stuff. It's irregular, right? So starts off a bit more narrow at the wrist, and as it goes up towards the fingers, it gets a bit wider. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then this side here, this plane here where the knuckles are, it's not a straight line, right? These knuckles run along a curve. That curve peaks. It's like highest at the middle finger knuckle here. And so we end up with this kind of shape. Someone in the study group, Natalie I think it was, said it looks like a slice of bread. And I think that's a really cool way to remember it. And you're going to find that slice of bread shape in every hand pose, right? It takes practice to get good at it, but let's just think about how you would actually do it. So I always explain it in a slightly gruesome way, which is, right, so along this side of the palm box, that's pretty much the end plane of the palm box. So that's easy. But along here, you got to imagine these fingers all being chopped off. And then what would the plane be that would be left if you just chopped off all those fingers around that curve? Now on the thumb, this is probably the trickiest side. You're going to go along this side plane of it, right? Imagine the thumb is kind of pulled back. This side plane that runs along the index finger like that. If the thumb's out here, you're going to chop it straight off. If the thumb is here, you'd want to chop that off. And so you'll end up with a shape that ignores the thumb. And that takes some practice to figure out how to just ignore that thumb. In terms of chopping it off at the wrist, it can be confusing, like if the hand is at different, bent in different ways. A lot of people want to like bend the box along with it, but you don't want to do that. So just imagine those carpals running through from the knuckles back through the hand like this, and just chop off the hands perpendicular to those. And that is going to give you this boxy shape in every hand that you see. Now, one added complication here, right, is it's not a flat box. It's got a bit of an arch to it, right? So if you look at some fingers from the front, you'll see that the palm has a kind of arch to it, like the slice of bread is a little bit bent. I find that trying to draw that as well, like the box shape is already, not super simple. It's pretty simple, but I need it to be really simple. So I often just don't have that arch in the boxy shape. And then as I build up the hand drawing, I'll bring in that idea of how it's arched. Because I can't do it all at once, like draw so many ideas at once in that initial box. If I'm looking at a hand like from the front, let's say, I will bring in that arch, but then I might forget about the curve going through those knuckles because it's just so hard to imagine the curve through the knuckles and the arch at the same time. So I'll probably draw, really think about one and less the other. And then as I build up the drawing, I can bring out more ideas. So that is the palm box, and that is the thing to really practice and spend time on, because once you can throw that down, you're going to be halfway there with every hand you draw. So then we're going to add either fingers or a thumb, depending on what you want to add next. And let's talk about the thumb first. So we've got this whole structure of the thumb that we want to add onto the palm box. And normally that's going to be made up of 3 forms. There's the form that actually attaches onto the palm box right here. Then this little cylindrical bit in the middle, and then the thumb tip, right? The bit that you would give your thumbprint with. And so for this form right here, if it's coming out to the side of the palm box, you know, it might be a kind of triangular wedge shape, right? When it comes out more like this, like perpendicular to the palm, because the thumb has this incredible range of motion to it, then it's a more rounded form, a bit like an egg shape, right? And that egg shape is kind of embedded into that palm box. And you know what? I normally look, however it's held, I normally look for a kind of egg shape. If it's out like this, it's a slightly flatter egg shape. If it's out like this, it might be a stronger, more rounded egg shape. I just look for an egg shape for this, if I can see it. Then for here, it's just a simple cylinder. I was going to say something, you know, I wanted to do like this food analogy, like this is the bread, this is the egg shape, and then this is going to be like a little cylindrical food, like a cocktail sausage. And maybe all the fingers would be made up of those as well. But I realize that's a terrible analogy, because one problem a lot of people have is drawing hands where the fingers look like sausages. Because the difference is that this cylinder, a sausage kind of, as a cylinder, it kind of bulges out in the middle. And actually, because of these little fatty pads we have on our fingers, a lot of people draw the cylindrical shapes in fingers or in the thumb as cylinders that kind of bulge out in the middle. And that's how you get that kind of sausage finger feel to it. So I realize that's a terrible analogy. So we're just going to go for a cylindrical shape that doesn't bulge out in the middle. If anything, it might get even slightly narrower in the middle section of it on the thumb. And then, but I would just draw it as a simple cylinder, and then you can build on top of that. You know, with these simple forms, you just got to think about it as like a sculptor throwing down lumps of clay. So you're putting down the palm box, you're putting down the egg shape, you're putting down the cylinder. It's an initial lump of clay which you're then going to sculpt into with your drawing. Now for the thumb tip, I don't really have a useful analogy, whether it's food or anything like that, or a simple form. It's just really a distinctive form on its own, right? It's a little bit kind of rounded, it's got a flatter top. One side, it kind of curves back, and then the other side curves back even stronger. You can see it all the time on your own hand, so you've got a really good reference point for what this form looks like, and you can practice drawing it from different angles. But those are the 3 forms of the thumb, and this introduces a major skill that you need when you're drawing hands, because now we've gone over 4 forms, right? The palm box and the 3 forms of the thumb, and they're always going to overlap in different ways. So one is going to be in front of the other one, and being able to overlap your simple forms and hide the one behind, you know, behind the one in front, is actually something our brains resist. Our brains often try to draw forms like they're separate and not overlapped. But if you can overlap them, you're going to bring a sense of depth. It's going to work way better. So now we want to add the fingers. And before we get there, I think it's worth thinking about these knuckles, right? So we talked about how there's a curve through the knuckles. That curve peaks at the middle finger knuckle. But something that I see a lot is, especially when the knuckle, this row of knuckles, is at an angle to us, so we're looking at it from an angle, these are pretty big structures, these knuckles, right? They're embedded into the palm, they're pretty big structures, and they're often overlapped, right? And a lot of people will kind of stretch them out as if they're not overlapped, or struggle with how they're overlapped. And I think sometimes it's useful to think of them as 4 ball shapes set into that palm box, and then think about how those ball shapes overlap each other from our point of view. So you can imagine like a ball shape here, a ball shape here, a ball shape here, and a ball shape here, and see how those balls are overlapping each other to help you figure out those knuckles. Only when it's useful. Like, these are all tools. you can use them when they're going to be useful. When they're just going to be extra work for no benefit, then forget about them. So when it comes to the fingers, yes, there's 3 sections to each finger, and there's 4 fingers, so that's 12 forms just in the fingers. We've already had 4, so now we're talking about 16 forms we're dealing with. This is why hands are so difficult, because we've potentially got 16 different forms going in different directions in 3D space, and we're trying to draw them in a sort of coherent way, and that's really difficult. So the first thing that I'd recommend is to find a line or a curve that kind of unifies those fingers in some way. So let's say the fingers are like this. We might firstly be able to forget about the separate 12 forms in here, all these little cylindrical shapes, and think about the simple planes that they create. So a plane across here and maybe one other plane across here, because maybe the fingers are a bit bent or something like that. And so to do that, you can find the curve through these knuckles and then the curve through these knuckles as a way of getting to that broader plane. And then you put a side plane on it, and now you've turned the fingers from this bunch of really complicated forms, which is quite hard to draw, to one simple form. So that is as much, when you've got a hand like this, say, you know, you can turn this into one single plane, you can make this group of fingers into a simple boxy shape. So the more you can reduce down from 16 forms to fewer forms, the better. Let's say the fingers are all like going in different directions, so it's not easy to make one simple box shape or whatever from them. You can very often, they're not all random, right? The way that our hands go, it's quite graceful, they work together. So even when they're separate, often there is still a unifying curve running through the knuckles or through the fingertips. So I'd recommend finding the most obvious of those and drawing that in. So you can see in some of these demos that I build the palm box, I might add the thumb, and then I'll add like one line that unifies what's happening with those fingers. Even though the fingers are going in different directions, there's still a kind of gestural, you know, through flow, like a connection through those. And I want to put that down to help me get started with them. Now, eventually you're going to have to draw the actual forms of the fingers, and thinking about them as 3 cylindrical sections is really useful for that. Now, what I mentioned before about trying to avoid that sausage finger look, you know, don't get too drawn in by those fatty pads. Remember that, yes, there might be a sort of bulge out on the palm side of the finger when you look at it from the side, but then that's going to be set against a flatter straight on the other side. So you're going to have a straight against the curve. But also, when it comes to the sort of broader gesture of the finger, really try to emphasize firstly the curve, the sort of tapering down of the finger, right? So from whatever angle you look at it, the finger gets narrower as it goes away from the palm. So you can give that tapering to it. You can really bring out the gap between the fingers wherever possible, because that, for whatever reason, that really helps to avoid that kind of sausage finger look. So in terms of like the gesture of these different forms, it's worth noting that, let's say the thumb, it's not just a straight, you know, cylinder and then this thumb tip form. It often has this broader curve back to it, right? So it tapers down and it curves back when it's straight. With the fingers, if it's straight, it's often not actually totally straight. It often curves back. And when it's pressing on something, that curve back is going to be even stronger, right? With the fingers, sometimes you might want to take some artistic liberties with what's happening. So if the fingers are sort of bent into 3 different directions for the 3 different sections of the finger, you might just adjust that final fingertip form to create a nice single gestural curve with this section. And now instead of 3 directions to the finger, we just have 2, and it just kind of flows a bit nicer. That is completely subjective. If you want to do that, I think it often works out pretty well. So when it comes to proportions, obviously these all go out the window with foreshortening, etc. But roughly speaking, on the back side of the palm, you know, the length from the wrist to the middle finger knuckle is about the same distance as the middle finger knuckle to the end of the middle finger. And then it's just worth noting that as you go away from the palm, each section of the finger gets a bit shorter. So it might be about 2/3 of the, like this might be 2/3 of this, which might be 2/3 of this, roughly speaking. A lot of those appear differently on the palm side because you tend to think of the palm as going up to this webbing here. Whereas on this side, you kind of don't include the webbing. So it just kind of feels like the proportions are different on this side versus this side. Is something to keep in mind. I wouldn't worry about that stuff too much because you're going to be drawing hands in all kinds of different angles. The key skill, the thing to spend tons of time on with the hand, in my opinion, is not so much standard proportions or anatomy or whatever. It's about simple forms, seeing the simple forms in the way that I described, trying to overlap them, see how they overlap, see where this one disappears behind the other one, and get really good at drawing that. And the really cool thing is that you can draw your own hand and really see those forms in 3D space and try to overlap them. It's an incredibly powerful exercise, not just for hands, but for your drawing in general to do this. And so if you just do every evening, you know, a half hour, whatever it is, 10, 15 minutes, just sketching your own hand in a really relaxed way, thinking about those simple forms and overlapping them, it's going to have a big payoff for your drawing skills.
If you like our tutorials and you're learning to draw figures, you're going to love this PDF guide. It gives you all the skills that you need to work on in order, and then asks you questions to figure out which skill you need to work on next, and then gives you links to the tutorials you need to learn those skills. We've also got a free mini course. It's a 10-day course. It is super powerful and effective. And for your regular figure drawing practice, we have tons of free references you can use in our free reference library. The link to all this stuff is below.
We have other videos about different areas of the figure. So I'm going to put 2 of them up on the screen. You can either choose rib cages, probably the most important thing to be able to see in the whole figure, or pelvises, the second most important thing to see in the figure. Check one of them out and I'll see you there.